Howdy, Fi Guys. Welcome back to the Fi Guys podcast. If this is your first time here, I'm Dominic and my co-host is Chris. We'll be talking about what it means to be a man in finance today. It's going to be a great podcast. I would say stick around to the end because we really get in deep with what it means to be a well-rounded man in today's society. Don't worry, it is a great podcast and we're going to be doing a quick little recap. Well, not a quick recap, but a normal recap on Friday as well with the viewer mailbag. But I hope you stick around for Monday's podcast. Hope you enjoy. Let's get right into the episode.
All right, Dom. So today we're going to have a pretty interesting episode, something we haven't done before. But what I'm thinking is, and what I've been seeing a lot with my coaching clients, is that we're moving into a crisis of what it means to be a man in this world today. And I'm seeing from a lot of my clients that they don't know how to bridge that gap of being a provider, of being financially independent, a FI guy, if you will, and how to be a man today. I recently watched The Antisocial Network, which is on Netflix. Huge recommendation to watching it. But a lot of it talks about the confusion that young men have today on what it means to actually be a man. So the question I want to pose to you is, should we start to tailor our podcast to men pursuing financial independence rather than the general, what we're doing currently, of everyone pursuing financial independence? And let me preface it with, I don't want us to neglect our FI gals. Like, they're always going to be a part of it. And I would want them to learn from it because there is nothing that is unique to men or unique to women when it comes to finance. You know, the principles are going to be the principles. But I think from you and I, from our standpoint, we have a unique ability to speak to men. I can't speak to the female condition. I've never been a female. I wasn't born a female. I've never been treated like a female. I don't look like a female, unfortunately. I look like an old man. So, you know, I'd rather, I don't know, that was just kind of my question. Would you think it might be good for us to tailor the podcast to men since we are the FI guys?
Interesting. What an interesting topic. All right. Okay. I mean, we are the FI guys. We know about that. We heard about that. I think being a man is being a leader, right? And what we're doing on this podcast is we're trying to teach people how to lead themselves through finance. Like you said, the principles for men in regards to finance, they're the exact same. 3% rule 72, all this stuff we talk about, just because you got different DNA or different chromosomes, it's going to work out the same way. I like the idea you're proposing. I like it. I think better than just teaching men, I think it's better to teach leaders. And because women can lead. I mean, it's in the 40s, but so many Anchorman references I could make here, but I won't. I like the idea. I like the concept of talking more about what it means to be a man. Again, handsome as we are, we're not ladies. We don't know what that's like, and I'll never know what that's like, so I can't speak on it too much. But I think it's an interesting concept. Could you explain it to me a little bit more?
Yeah, I say that, we use this podcast to explore this idea and see if it resonates with our audience too before we make a change. But, I talk a lot about Taoism and figuring out the balance of life. And I feel like our podcast is, of course, about financial independence, but we talk so much more about philosophy and your psychology and stoicism and just the way that you think about your thinking. And I've noticed a lot from our viewer mailbags on Five Friday feedback that we're getting a lot of young men reaching out to us, asking us these questions, and questions where if the sexes, men and female, is far right, far left, whatever words you want to use, there's just two opposing forces. You can use the word black and white, you can use left, right, you can use Republican, Democrat, but I think for so long, history has always skewed towards what it means to be like a man. And I can think from my own family, like I grew up in a Hispanic family and Hawaiian. And like those are both two very extreme versions of like what it means to be a man. Like you were a warrior, you're a provider, you're all these things. And for the first time, I think, or at least in history that I can remember, that is under attack. What being a man is under attack. And I'm seeing a lot of young people, especially like I also coach jujitsu. I see a lot of men like confused because like I teach people how to fight other people. Like there is, I think, something in all men of like, we want to go to war. We want to fight. We want to test ourselves. And for the first time, it's our society is saying everything that you think, everything that is might be genetically hardwired into you to fight, to go to war, to provide, to be a leader, to do all these things, that is wrong.
Mhm.
And I think we're creating a false dichotomy where, yes, maybe for too long, I'm thinking like the 1950s, 1960s, like that, you get home and your wife has a martini for you, like that, this pendulum swung too far to the right. But now I see the pendulum swinging far too much to the left, and having a crisis of compassion, like I think our society is currently experiencing, where we want to help everybody, and it's only kind to help everybody, where maybe the male might say, no, we only want to help ourselves, where the truth again is somewhere in the middle. Um, I just think we could help more people, because I think there's a lot of podcasts out there that are talking towards helping more people. And of course I want to help more people. That's the whole idea of the podcast. But I think it's also important that you can't help other people until you start to help yourself. So we need to take that pendulum, and I think we could have a unique place to bring it back more to the center. And again, we can never speak to the female experience. I can't, no matter how much I want to. And like, I love women, so please don't think it's that.
Yeah.
Like my wife is my favorite person. Like the favorite person I have in this world is a woman, and that's never going to change. But I can never speak to her experiences.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair. I mean, we'll never understand what it's like to be a woman, like you said. I'd like to start off and just by, what's your definition in regards to being a man, but also in regards to finance? Like, what does it mean to be a man in finance?
Ooh,
And a man in general.
you're going to blow us up in the comments, aren't you?
And don't, when I say a man in finance, I'm not talking about 6'2", like Patrick Bateman, like that level. I'm not talking like that, like Wall Street, like no, not corporate America. I'm talking about like a normal. What do you picture? What do you envision? What is your goal?
And this is the reason I want to bring this up.
Mm-hmm.
So recently on one of my coaching calls with a client, I had somebody who was a lot like me, someone who wanted to stay home with the kids. Like that was their goal. They want to stay home with the kids one day. And that meant that their wife had to step up and bring in more money. And this client was talking to me and telling me, I don't know how I feel about that. And we started delving down these rabbit holes of, they have this story in their head of like, men must provide, men must always make money, men must always lead. And when I worked with them, I worked on them on the dichotomy of, yes, I agree, men should more often than not probably lead the household. But leading the household does not mean that you have to make all the money. It does not mean that you have to be in control of the finances. And what I was able to, the realization that we both came to in that discussion was, is it okay for a woman to make more money than you, but you still be the leader of the house? Could the best way for you to lead this house is not for you to lead from the front, but to realize when there is someone who is better than you at making money, better than you at doing something else, and your idea of leadership is to get the hell out of their way.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's okay to be a man who wants to stay home, be with the kids, do all these things that we've always traditionally said that's a woman's job. Maybe it's okay for a man to do that, because you can still lead the household, you can still lead the finances, you can still do all these things. Too many men today are playing victim with who they are and saying like, oh, my finances are a mess and that's not my fault. That's women's fault, or that's my job's fault. And there's no woman that's going to want to be with a man who has none of their shit together. So I think that by us focusing on finances, we can help get money out of the way for men so that they can focus on being better, whatever it is they want to focus on. Because everyone has their strengths and their differences. But I think too often we're focused on, we as men wrap our identity with how much money we're making. I must be a good man because I am making X amount of money. And I fall into that trap too. I mean, that's probably a lot of where my depression came from when I went through all that stuff, was losing my job, going through all those things, trying to start the company and not having the company be where I wanted it to be, where it is today.
Yeah.
And then kind of losing that, what it means to be a man. And I see a lot of young people confused as to what it means to be a man, because it's so difficult now. We don't have heroes. Historically, I remember growing up in the 90s and my father watched a lot of like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone movies, and like just
Yeah.
movies of like just 80s men's movies. Were they
Yeah.
terrible? Yes. They were so stupid. It's just shooting and like there's no conversation, no nuance, but it gave me a goal. Like that is what a man means. And is that the right idea of what a man should be? Should you just be running around smoking cigars, banging women, and shooting guns? Probably not. You should have a little bit more nuance than just that. But one thing that we do with the podcast that I found a lot of comments on is that we bring a lot of nuance to the conversation because we are a longer form podcast. And that's why our shorts probably don't do super well because you can't break nuance down into a 30-second short. What do you think about that?
Gosh, so much to unpack there. So much to unpack there. I would agree. I'm just gonna take every point as I think of it. Um, I think for a long period of time, for my era growing up, there was no Rocky Balboa. There was no uh like these action heroes, right? Sure, you had action movies, great action movies. Um, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Arnold, ones like those, but they didn't really capture the American experience in regards to like young boys. I think for me, only when I got out of high school, right? So 18, did I start like, oh, who is this Jocko Willink? Who is this Leif Babbitt? Who is this Robert Greene? Who is, Jordan Peterson? Who is David Goggins? Who are these guys? Like, I think for me, very grateful that they emerged when they did, because they've changed millions of lives for sure.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't, dude. I wouldn't have started going to the gym. I wouldn't have started eating
I
healthy.
wouldn't be here with all of without those men in my life
No,
and like even my father and like all these like
yeah,
all this stuff. But I think right now, and I'm going to use a Fight Club reference, but we are a generation raised by women.
hmm
And like I remember growing up, my dad was in the military and he was gone a lot, and I was raised by my mom. And I think as a kid, I was more feminine because I was raised by a woman. I didn't
same.
understand like that balance. And then when my dad came back and he was trying to make me a man, then I swung too far to the other side and like became stoic and like unemotional and a robot. And like I have to
Yeah,
fight and do all these things I still love today. But
yeah,
like I can be someone who is a jujitsu practitioner who like can go around and I know I can probably kill 98% of the people that I meet. But also like I have the ability to have, and it's been something that I've been working on for the past few years, to be able to be in touch with my emotions, to feel sad, to feel happy, to be better than just feeling anger. I think too many men are just okay with being angry.
hmm
And while I would love to talk about, working out, jujitsu, all these other things, the way that you look at the world for your personal philosophy, like Jocko does, like David Goggins does, like even Joe Rogan does.
hmm
But I think one thing that we have a unique ability to do, both you and I, is talk to men about finances.
yeah,
Because when I'm looking at like what things am I good at, what things do I think I have a realm to actually be able to speak about, it's what does it mean to be a man in this modern age, and what does it mean to be financially independent? How do you create that money, that perpetual money machine that'll work for you and work for your family and work for future generations? In addition to how do you bridge that gap to also being a man, and how do you find that dichotomy,
yeah,
especially for someone like me who wants to stay home and be home with the kids and
mhm,
like take on what would be traditionally a feminine role but still be masculine doing it?
yeah,
Like can you be a man and still be a stay-at-home dad? Can you be a
mm,
provider and still be a stay-at-home dad? I don't hear
mm,
anyone talking about that, but I
mm,
think 100% you can be. And hopefully maybe we can show people that there's a different way of living. I'm not
yeah.
saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's different and it can also be sustainable given that you have the family structure that is built around that. And that's something that you desire.
And I think a lot of it all starts with a conversation, right? That's what our podcast is doing, right? We're just introducing an idea that you may or might not have had as the viewer, and we're just trying to bring it more into society, basically. But if you wanted to bring this idea into your real world, you talk with your partner about it, see what they feel. You know, you got to sell them on a vision, right? You got to sell them on a dream, and you got to come through as well when doing so. It's funny enough. I actually was raised by my mother as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, my dad was still in my life. He was awesome. He was great. I love my dad. He's so awesome. Big shout out to him. And I'd see him on Wednesdays, and I'd go with him on every other weekend. And he taught me a lot. But most of my childhood was spent with my mother as well. My mom's a little bit more of a tomboy than a traditional feminine woman. Being police officer and whatnot, deputy sheriff. There's a difference between police and deputies. And if I just say police, like I'm going to hear about it when this podcast drops. So I'm like, I got to clear the air right there. So, no, I think you're right though. That Fight Club reference was spot on. We're a generation of men without a war, without a place to test ourselves and push ourselves. And if we're not testing ourselves and we're not pushing ourselves, if you're not going up, you're going down. And we're getting a little bit soft as a nation of men. And
I see that a lot, and that's the thing that scares me. And that's the thing that I want people. That's I think what we can help at. And maybe we can't help people become better fit, better anything. But I think if you get better in any aspect, you get better in every aspect. And there is no aspect that money does not touch. So again, just in our unique ability to, I mean, you and I, we literally just got back from the gym, and I was able to teach you some gym stuff and stuff like that. But that's not my background. I'm not a background in like biosciences or physique or anything like that. Like, do I like that stuff? Of course. But the thing that my career has progressed down is in finance, and maybe bridging this gap as to what it means to be a FI guy. What does it actually mean to be financially independent, provide for your family, and have the nuance to realize that maybe you don't have to be, maybe providing for your family doesn't mean that you have to bring in all the money.
Yeah. Because I've talked to women about this before, and they're very, very complex creatures. I would say probably more complex than us.
I would agree with that.
I would definitely agree with it. Yeah. And I asked him, I said, what does it mean to be, for me as a man, what does it mean to be a provider to you? Right. Usually like third on the list is money. If I'm making all the money, but I'm not giving you any love, it's not going to work. If I'm not compassionate, it's not going to work. Considerate, not going to work. Money is only one part of the whole picture, right? And I think for too long, a lot of men focus on one aspect. Oh, I got to be rich so I can have a good wife. It's like, okay, well, are you developing your, interpersonal communication skills? Are you learning other things? Are you learning how to fight? Are you learning how to cook? Are you learning, to become a more well-rounded person? I'd much rather be well-rounded than an expert in a certain area and be bad at everything else. And to each their own, But yeah, what do you think about that, Chris?
I think you brought up an interesting thing that I really want to touch upon. And as our society, after industrialization, everyone used to be polymaths. And what a polymath is that you're good in a bunch of different domains. If you think back to Leonardo da Vinci, if you think back to Nikola Tesla, if you think back to Benjamin Franklin, these were not men who hyper-focused on one thing. The reason that Leonardo da Vinci was able to be both a Renaissance man and a painter and a philosopher and an inventor is because he studied many multiple disciplines, and that is what made him uniquely him.
Mm-hmm.
But after industrialization, we began to see that the way that you make money isn't by focusing on a bunch of different things. It's by hyper-focusing. So I think that too many men, just because of the societal expectations of reward and punishment, they were rewarded for hyper-focusing, becoming really good at one aspect. And that one aspect they did was, I'm going to become really good at making money and going down super hard into this one thing. And that works really, really well until society starts to collapse. And I'm not saying that our society is going the way of Rome, but it seems to me like we're starting to move down that direction. And if shit hit the fan, you having a bunch of money is not going to keep your family safe. You having a bunch of skills will keep your family safe. So one thing that I've always tried to do is try to work on a bunch of different skills. So I work on psychology, I work on philosophy, I work on physics, I work on fighting, money, all this stuff that I'm trying to focus on being good, a well-rounded individual. And just like you mentioned earlier, when you ask women, like, what do you need from me? Like, what does a man mean to you? I remember when I was going through all my stuff with me and my wife, or with myself, dealing with depression, I felt bad because the story I was telling myself was that I am not providing for my wife financially. But if you asked her, what do you need from Chris? It had nothing to do with me providing financially. Obviously, finance is important. You can't live without making money. We have to live in the real world. But what she really wanted from me was for me to be there for her, to support her, to make the hard decisions when we needed to be there, to protect her in terms of whatever she needed from me. But none of those things that she said that she wanted from me had anything to do with making more money. And I think what she did want to see from me is that I was ambitious, that I was seeking after something greater than where I currently was. And if that led to more money, wonderful. But even if it just led to me being a better person, a better provider, a better spouse, wonderful too. That's what really she wanted, was just that I was trying to become better. And you look to your spouse or your significant other, if you are a man and you're thinking, what do I want out of my partner? Do you want them to make more money? Do you want them to be more beautiful? Do you want them to do any one thing? And I think you would say, like, no, I don't want just one aspect. If they only focused on becoming more beautiful, or like only focused on like fixing just their beauty, but they started spending all their money, became an asshole or became a bitch, and like whatever word you want to
Yeah,
use, you wouldn't want that either. You want a well-rounded partner.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I kind of think, so where would a person take that first step in becoming that well-rounded person? First, you must have a vision, but sometimes it's tough to create a vision. I don't want to make excuses, but it definitely helps when you have a clear vision. It's like, this is what I'm shooting for and why I'm shooting for it. Not because, like, sure, I want to look like Conor McGregor. Okay. Well, why do you want to look like Conor McGregor? Well, because he looks cool. He's respected. It's like, okay, that's not a great why. We can build on it. Not great. It's not great. And we talk about this a lot on the podcast. Having a strong why makes the how so much easier. And what I mean by that is how I'm going to get this done. How am I going to do this, right? Say I broke my back, right? And I'm never going to walk again. The doctors say I'm never going to walk again, right? But for me, it's like, no, I want to walk my daughter down the aisle. That's my why. It's a strong why. It's a very important why to me. Well, since the why is strong, the how is easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
So, yeah.
Simon Sinek once said, start with why, but before Simon Sinek, there was Viktor Frankl in A Man's Search for Meaning said, a man with a strong enough why can endure any how. And he is a man that made it through the Holocaust in order to see his wife at the end of it. That's the reason that he fought through all of it. Now, unfortunately, when he got out of the Holocaust, his wife was dead. But that vision of, I want to see my wife, I want to be there with her again, that is what kept him going through one of the most horrific incidences that a human being can endure.
Yeah.
And how do we create that in men? How do we create that today? Because I think an issue that we have today is, yes, things are bad. Things aren't great, but everyone thinks they're living in the end times. Everyone through all of history has thought that. A book that I read last week, or 2 weeks ago, I read two books simultaneously. One was Nuclear War, a Scenario, which is about what would happen if an all-out nuclear war started. And the other book was The End is Always Near by Dan Carlin, which is a compendium of different parts of history where everyone thought the world was ending, because in their world it was ending, but history continued to move on. And I think the reason that we study history, the reason that I like to study history, is because I am a being of history. I am making history right now. Someday someone will be able to look back on this, and I'm going to play a very, very small part of what makes up history. but I am a part of it. So the reason we study it is because we can say, oh, I've seen this before, and I'm also going to interact with society. But where I was going with all that was, right now we are in the best of times. Like there's never a time that you can go back in history and find a place that you want to live. Like, we have food abundant to us. If you're hungry, go down to the store and get it. If you don't have the money to do that, you can go to a food bank. If you get sick, we have penicillin. Like, if you have diarrhea, you can get some medication for that. Historically, you got diarrhea, you died. Like, it was over for you.
Crazy.
And we live in the best of times, and now people are looking for an enemy, because we always, I think as men, we need an enemy. We need someone to fight. We need someone to fight after. And in all stories, there are 4 characters that are played. There's the hero, the guide, the victim, and the villain. I'll tell you that no one can be their own guide. That's impossible in the story, because you always need somebody else. But of course, you can seek out your own guides. You can read books, you can listen to podcasts, you can seek out mentorship. But people in the story are going to play 3 characters: the hero, the villain, or the victim. And what I see a lot of people playing today is they're not playing the hero of their own story. They're playing the victim of their own story, or they're playing the villain. And what I want to do is be able to get people to start playing their own hero. And yes, the journey is harder. I think of the story of Hercules. Hercules had the ability to become a god, but what he had to do that is he had to become the hero. He had to go through the trials. He had to go through the tribulations. He had to go through all that stuff, so at the end, he could be where he wanted. And we can even take another story. Think of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ had the hardest thing. He could have played the victim. And everyone, and I think today a lot of people are trying to play that. They're trying to play victim because they think it gets them an automatic win. Oh, if I had a harder life than you, then that means that you can't talk anything about anything to me. But what Jesus did is he took that pain, that suffering, and he said, "Forgive them, Father, for they now do not know what they don't know what they do." Whatever word he said.
Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Yeah,
exactly. So he did that. He became the hero. His being a victim made him the hero. And oftentimes the victim and the hero and the villain have the same backstory. They both have the same hurt. But the hero says, what can I do to learn from this so that other people don't have to go through this? The villain says, fuck that. I had to go through this. Now I'm going to make other people experience it too.
Yep.
And too many people are living in either the victim of, they're just going to stay in it, and I'm just going to keep on complaining, blaming other people. I'm not going to deal with it because someone else has to come and save me. I want a hero to come and save me. Or they play villain and they go online and they try trashing other people and they just try to sit in their fucking basement and be awful people. And that is not what a hero does. A hero goes out into the world, they experience, they suffer, they fight, and they move forward. And I think that's what a man needs to be.
Absolutely.
And I'm not seeing that in our society. And again, I can't fix everything, but what I can fix is if we can get the money aspect fixed, if we can begin to teach men that your self-worth is not tied to your bank account. Your emotions around money are highly uncorrelated to how much money you have in the bank, despite what people think. So if I can get people to realize that, that's what I want. I mean, I want people to live the life that I have if they want that life. Like, how awesome is it that every day for me is a Saturday? Like this morning I woke up, I chilled, went to the gym, cleaned my house, like relaxed, and it's a weekday where most people are working. And some people are going to hear that and be like, well, that's because your parents gave you a bunch of money, or because you had all these leg ups. If you've heard my story, you can go back. We did that. I had no benefits.
No.
But I created a perpetual money machine by going on a journey. And it was terrible. And a lot of things I've gone through in my life, I want to be able to come back and tell people these are the things that I fell into so that you can avoid them, so that you can get to where I am without having to put in over a decade of hard work and so much issues to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to like the hero, the villain, the guide, and the victim. I think as kids, when we fall, usually the mother is there to pick you up, right? Coddle you. Tell you it's okay. You're gonna be okay. And I think that's really important. You know, you need someone there when you're that young to be like that, to be that person for you. But too many boys are growing up to be the age of men, but not the man.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found, and happens to me too, I was on my drive home on Wednesday. Terrible day. Horrible day. Not a great day. Not a great day. Massive traffic was shut down on the way to work. I think someone died on the freeway. Cussed out by some people. Not great. I think I got some paint in my eye too. But not a great day. Not a great day. And I'm on my way home. I'm like, man, I want to tell someone about this, man. I want to tell someone about this. I want someone to feel bad for me. I want someone to feel sorry for me. Sat there in silence, driving through traffic. I got a lot of traffic to get home, so it was a long trip. But sitting there, driving through traffic, and I just want someone to feel bad for me, man. I want someone to pity me. Oh, nobody cares. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a dig on society. But nobody cares. You're doing it for selfish reasons that isn't benefiting. So instead, I had the thought process of, you know what, today did suck. Today was horrible. One of the worst in the last 3 months. But it is what it is. And it's in the past. And I can either choose to be a victim. I can choose to be a villain. I can't be a guide. Or I can choose to be a hero and move on. And darn it, man, I went home. I made some burgers. Oh, I was chilling. I was happy as a Labrador dog, honestly. And oftentimes I have to stop myself because sometimes I do play the victim card. I do play the victim card, and that's one of my tropes. That's one of my downfalls, right? That I'm working on. And I'm getting better. I've gotten a lot better. I think I've gotten a lot better on it. I can't remember. I think it was Joe Rogan who said this, but he's like, imagine you're in a movie and you're being filmed all the time, and your life is just a movie, and you're the hero, you're the main character of your movie, and your life starts now. It's like, well, what are you doing? What do you do now? It's like, I love that. What would you do if a camera crew followed you 24/7? First of all, that would suck. But you'd get up on time. You'd probably eat healthier. You'd do what you're supposed to do because it's documented, right? Like they said in the movie Gladiator, what we do in life echoes in eternity. And I love that. And the way I look at that quote and the previous quote is whenever I'm doing something, I like to think about my ancestors, right? I didn't know all of them. How could I? But if they're up in heaven and they're watching me, they struggled with everything. Depression, the Great Depression, economy collapses, death, marriage failures, everything. Famine, probably. Somewhere in my lineage, there was a famine. I don't know. Are they going to look down and be like, wow, he is wasting his life? Or are they going to look down and be like, wow, he's trying. That's more than some of us. He's trying to better himself. He's using the tools that he has to change the people around him and the world around him. Like, my life mission is just be a force for good. Simple as that. Be a force for good. I think it's important to have a North Star. Do you have any tips on how to develop that North Star?
I do. But before we do that, I think that's a really powerful exercise. And if you're listening to this podcast, if you're a human being alive, you descend from heroes. You descend from people who have fought and worked hard to get you to live right now. And I think it's a very powerful exercise to remember that you descend from heroes, because every single person in history has had to go through something in life in order to pass on their genes, in order to keep their kids alive long enough that they could have kids again. So I think that's a powerful exercise to look back and say, I want to echo the people of history. But also you can also have the ability to say, what can I do today to make my grandchildren proud of me? Even if you don't have grandchildren, what can I do today to make my future generations look back and say, that's when things change around. That's the person. So in order to figure out, how do I figure out my why? How do I figure it out where I want to go? It's going to be a crapshoot, because if someone says like, oh, this is where I want to be when I'm 67, you don't know. You have no idea where the world's going to be. You can't project that far, but you can say, what kind of person do I want to be when I'm 67? Do I want to be a good person? Do I want to be loved by my family? Do I want to have respect for myself? And rather than looking at other people, do I want people to love me? No, do I want to love myself? Do I want to have all these things? Because I think it was Charlie Munger that said, if you want to find a good spouse, be a good spouse. If you want to be worthy of fame, of affection, of being remembered in history as being a good person, then you need to put in that work every single day for that to be remembered. You know, I focus a lot with my business on estate planning recently, especially at the end of the year. It's something that we start to try to get ready for. Do we have a trust in place? Do we have all this stuff in place? And too often do I end up in a point where someone says, hey, I want to set up this trust so that my kids can't fuck it up, can't mess up all the things that I did. I want them to get this money, and if they do it wrong, I want to get taken away and moved to the other person. And they're trying to control money from the grave, which is an impossible task. And I always have to come to the conclusion, I have to tell them, and it's always hard for them to hear, if you can't pull it out in the ninth inning, you can't fuck up your kids your entire life, you can't be a piece of shit your entire life, make all this money, and then at the end of it, try to make legal loopholes to keep your family being generationally wealthy. Your family should be generational wealthy because they know your story, they know the history, and they know how to be good stewards of the capital. It's the same thing in life. You can't be a person who only focuses on money at the detriment of your family. The worst thing you can be is come home at the end of the day with a pocket full of dollars to a family that doesn't know you. Because if you project your life 50 years in the future, 30 years, 40 years in the future, and you look there and you say, wow, look how much money I have. You might have all that money, but what else? What did you give up for that? And I think men need to think about the balance. As a man, we need to figure out the balance. How do I make enough money to know what enough is, so that I'm making enough money, but that also I have the ability to have a good relationship with my kids, a good relationship with my spouse, a good relationship with my cats, and that I'm making an impact on my nuclear family, and then beginning to spread like concentric circles, the people that I impact more and more and more. People want to affect society. They want to fix the government. They want to fix whatever it is. But if you think about these like concentric rings, like tree rings, you can't focus on the society until you fix yourself. Once you fix yourself, you can start to fix your family. Once you fix your family, you can start to fix the neighborhood. After that, the community, the city. Then we get to move out to the wider society. But too many people want to fix the society without first even focusing on themselves and their family.
Yeah. I think that's part of the problem in this world. People wanting to fix society when they haven't mastered themselves. I knew of this person was a therapist, but gossiped all the time. Like not what you would want as a therapist, right? And it's like, you must lead by example if you want people to follow. Just as Jesus did, right? He led a sinless life. He never did any wrong. He led by example. He led, this is how I want you to live. Be good to people. Love your neighbor. You know, I think leading by example is the only way to do it. It's the only way.
Yep.
Especially as a parent.
It's the hard journey. It's the hero's journey. It's the hard journey. Think about it even with kids. I mean, how many parents say, like, do as I say, not as I do? Because, horrible. But the hard choice is to do the things that you say so that the kids will do what you do. Again, it's like trying to have your cake and eat it too. And that's just not the way it works. You can't just tell your kids, be a better person, save money, do all these things if you're not doing it yourself. I think there's too many people that I know in my life who are like, oh, well, you know, I can't save money because I have kids. Well, it's like, well, before you had kids, you weren't saving money. So now you just have an excuse. The same reason that people were saying, oh, my house looks like shit because I have kids. Well, your house looked like shit before you had kids. Now you just have an excuse. Stop being a victim and figure it out. And I always have breakthroughs with most of my clients when I ask them, what are you teaching your kids about money? What are your behaviors right now teaching your kids? And after we make the tangent or the bridge from what they learned from their parents and they're repeating the same thing, the things they hate about their parents, you're doing today. Too many men are focused on making the money so that people will one day be proud of them. When you realize that no one gives a shit about how much money you're making, if you're not a good person.
100%. 100%. I'd rather be lower middle class and a wonderful family than the richest guy in the world with a terrible family.
Too many people, they look at one aspect. I wish if I had the money, everything would be good.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever you compare yourself to somebody else, you don't just get one aspect of their life. If you compare yourself to somebody, you get all of it.
Yep.
If you want Elon Musk's money, then that means that you have to take the 7 failed marriages, the kids that don't talk to him, constantly being hounded on Twitter, constantly being hounded in the media, half the country hating you, half the country loving you. You take all of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Can't have your cake and eat it too. But I think I love that quote you said earlier. If you get better in one aspect, you get better in all aspects. I love that. And I think making a vision of the type of man your son or daughter would be proud to call dad is a great place to start. Because again, creating a powerful why. I don't want to be like, gosh, I don't want to, I want to be a deadbeat dad who's an alcoholic. It's like, no, I want to be a fit dad who's knowledgeable in all aspects or most aspects of life. And if I don't know, then I can go research, I can look it up, And I think taking that step, the first step is with the vision and creating a strong why. And then every day, getting closer. Every day, improving. Not a lot. I'm not asking you to learn Spanish in one day, 1 week, 1 month. But it doesn't matter how slow you go on your journey to the person you want to be as long as you keep going.
I want to tell you about a experiment that was run back in the 1970s that I think has amazing parallels to the world we have today. There was an experiment done back then. It was called Rat Utopia or Mouse Utopia. Mouse, not Mao, mouse, Mouse.
Mao Utopia.
Oof, well, Mao. Okay. Some people think that I say Mao, like Mao from
like
China.
China,
Mao's
yeah.
Utopia.
I was like, "Ooh, that's not a good utopia." But
well,
yeah,
he tried to create a utopia too, and then it went the opposite direction.
Anyway, carry on, please.
But in Mouse Utopia, they brought in 9 mice and they put them into a paradise where they had all the food they wanted, all the water, all the toys, all the everything. And this utopia, this place that they made, had enough for 6,000 rats to make it inside there. And the experimenters theorized that if we create this utopia, then the mice will probably live longer because they're living with this full abundance and they'll be able to spread. And then we'll see at what point do they begin to overexpand, because they think if everything's so good, they're going to keep on having more and more babies. And then eventually this facility that's only meant for 6,000 won't be able to hold it. And then what's going to happen after that? That was the long-term thesis. But the short-term thesis was things will get better. So they put 9 rats into or 9 mice into Mouse Utopia. Within a short order, there are about 2,000 mice, and everything is so good. They're all eating, they're all drinking, they're all playing, they're all doing whatever they want. But something amazing happened. It stopped at 2,000. That's when everything stopped, and they stopped having babies. And the reason for that was they had no more struggles. There was nothing they had to fight for. What they found was the male mice, began grooming themselves and hyper-focusing on becoming more feminine, on only focusing on glamour and being, pretty. But they were no longer fighting. They were no longer striving to actually mate with females because they were focused on their own vanity. And on contrast, females stopped having sex because they were no longer being courted. They were no longer seeing men being men. They only saw men acting as women. And I don't want to make this a political thing, so don't blow us up in the comments, but I see that happening a lot today, in that men have forgot how to be men, and that And yes, I agree. If you take it to an extreme where you're like this machismo guy who's, beats his wife and does all this shit, like, yeah, you're an asshole. But also you need to figure out how to find that balance where you are strong, you can fight, you can lead, and you also know how to follow, and you know when to sheath your sword. There's an old proverb that the meek will inherit the earth. And people read that and they hear, oh, meek, that must mean that the weak will inherit the earth. But meek was translated from Greek, what had a very different meaning. Meek meant the strong who know when to sheath their sword. So the meek will inherit the earth. What it really means is the people who are strong, but know when to show that strength. There's an old Miyoto Musashi quote that is, it is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And I think as men, we need to focus on becoming a warrior. And when you become a warrior, you realize that you don't need to do that, to be in a war in order to still be a man. It's too often that I see this a lot in business, and I see this a lot in jiu-jitsu, of men who are never really tested in the real world. They've never actually fought somebody. They've never actually taken their ideas into a business sense to see, does this hold up in the marketplace? Because in both those things, it is a fight. You are taking your ideas and you're putting it up against physics.
Mm-hmm.
And only people who have never been in a fight think they can fight.
It's true.
And
it's true.
Only people who have never started a business or tried to create a business think they can run a business. Because you're taking your idea, a concept in your head, and once you take that idea and your concept in your head and you put it into the real world, you realize that none of it worked. And that's okay. That's what you grow from. Same thing with a fight. We always have a game plan that I take my people through. Like, what's your game plan? I'm going to go in there, I'm going to pull guard, I'm going to do this, do this, do this. And if their game plan is too specific, I say, all right, we need to get rid of that game plan because it's too specific. And the moment you go out there, you get punched. Everyone has a plan till you get punched in the face. That is what business teaches us. That is what fighting teaches us. And only if you're well-rounded enough can you have the ability to pivot when you realize that, oh shit, my plan isn't following the way that I thought it was going to, because of course it wasn't. Your plan was in your head where you controlled all the variables. In reality, you control none of the variables except for yourself, except for how you're going to show up every day. And too many people aren't focusing on that. They're focusing on the variables. They're playing victim. They're playing villain. Where I'm saying if you focus on yourself, you can be the hero.
Yep. Control the controllables, which is you. Can't control your wife. Can't control the economy. Can't control most of the things in this world, but you can control yourself. And that's where it starts. Gaining control over yourself, your actions, habits, your thoughts. If you don't have control over those, there's no foundation to build on. Even if you have the perfect plan. I think it was George S. Patton, who said, the perfect plan only exists in the planning phase. Like Chris was saying, of course the plan's going to be perfect. Of course it's going to work in your head. Of course. Then you launch it. But I think it's really interesting what you're saying about if you have a plan too specific. You're not able to go with the flow and move as you need to move. Because life, you're going to need to be flexible.
You have to be like water.
Yep. Bruce Lee quote. Yep. Yeah, you put water in a glass, it becomes the glass. Put it in a kettle, it becomes the kettle.
And just, the balance, it's the dichotomy, right? The same thing with men and women. It's the dichotomy. If you have no plan, you're aimless. Mm-hmm. I might call that the feminine. You're just kind of going. But also, if you're too structured, you're too rigid on the plan, you also fail. You have to find the middle place. You have to find, if this is a scale of 1 to 10, you have to find that 5. But too many people, they focus, rather than going on finding that 5 path where I'm good in a bunch, like think of a stat chart when you're playing a video game.
Yeah.
You don't, oftentimes, like you can see the characters like, oh, he's super high in strength, but he's really low in speed and low in intelligence. Or you can find the character that's really good in magic, but they're low in all these other areas. What character do most people play as? What character do you play as when you go into it? You play as Mario when you're playing Mario Kart, when people are going, you play into someone who has a good amount of stats all across the board, And then you can start to figure out, how do I hyper focus if I want to hyper focus? But if you don't have all the good stats, you don't have a balanced level of stats, you're going to lose.
So many ways to look at life. You can look at it as the hero. You can look at life as a game. You can look at life as, here's my why and here's how I'm getting there. All different ways to grow as a person. And I think that's one of the issues we kind of talked a little bit around, is the fact that men aren't growing. They're staying boys. And it's causing society, it's causing a lot of turmoil in society. You got to have strong men. When the men are strong, and I'm not talking like, all the way to the right. Like, I'm not talking like the bad version of strong men, right? Because there's a version called toxic masculinity, and that's a whole other thing. I'm talking about strong, confident, respectable, considerate, knowledgeable, and dangerous.
Balanced.
Yeah. That's what we need. When we have that, the world moves a little bit smoother.
Yeah. And I would say we also need balanced females. Like we need both of those balances. But 100%. Again, the reason that I'm thinking, should we tailor our podcast more to men, is because I don't know what the balance is for females. I've never lived that experience. I can maybe look from the outside looking in and say, like, I think we should move more this direction or this direction. But in truth, I can't know. So there are other people that do that, thankfully. But I think there's something that we can do as our little place in the world of trying to make the world better. Both of our purposes is to try to make the world better than the way we found it. Is we can focus on the men and only focus on the tribe of people who want to be with us. So I don't, Dominic, want you to come to any conclusion today as if we're going to start to niche down or anything like that. But I wanted to begin to pose this question to you so we can begin to think about it and see, is that something that we want to do? Because I definitely don't want to give up on females. I love females. I love working with females. I think they're a lot easier than men to fix their money habits. But also I know that if I fix men, that I can fix the world. Same way if you fix females, you can fix the world. Because you have to fix both. You can't just focus on one. But I think we can do best by focusing on one, and someone else can focus on the other. And in truth, we all focus on getting better ourselves.
An interesting concept. Very interesting concept. Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts for today's podcast, Chris?
No, I'd say we take this back, we think about it, and then on 5 Friday feedback, we revisit the thought process and we see, where are we? What are we thinking about it? And then people who are listening in, leave it in the comments. What do you think? Do you think that we're completely off base? Do you think that we're right? Again, I'm not trying to say that women can't pursue financial independence. Women should pursue financial independence, and you can learn everything that we are learning. I would say listen in, because what I'm thinking, what my vision is, that we talk about how men think about the investing, how men think about these things. Because I can't think about it. I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I can't think that way. But I can think, as me as a man and you as a man, we can talk about what it means to be a man and how to think through these problems as a man.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for women, you can still listen to those things, and that way you can know, oh, that's how men think about it. Cool. This is how I think about it. And they're both right.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the principles still remain the principles. 4% rule is still the 4% rule for men and women. And again, it's a rule of thumb. But maybe a woman might look at it and say, like, oh man, there's a 3% chance of it failing. And a man might look at it and say, there's a 97% chance of it succeeding. And they are both correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. Hope you learned a little bit. Hope you're striving to be a better person at the end of the day. And we hope to see you on Friday. Thank you for sticking around. If you are this far into the podcast and you're not subscribed, might as well subscribe since you've already been here this whole time. I know you're a good person and I know you'll do it. So, yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you did enjoy it, which it would be crazy if you didn't enjoy it and got this far. But we highly recommend, the fee for the show is to share it with a friend. If you have a Discord community, drop it in a self-promo tab. If you have a friend, you're like, yeah, I like these guys. Check this out too. Mom and dad, Send it to them. A lot of great information here. Hope you guys enjoyed
Throw
it.
it in the family text.
Throw it in the family group chat. Exactly. But with that being said, hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you on Friday. Yeah. Later, guys.
Later.
Peace.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests, not the podcast sponsor. It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.